Hi everybody, I'm Hank Zona. I have the privilege of hosting this episode of Community Corner. And it really is a privilege because this show is really about an important aspect of community. Our guests here tonight are Karen Burns, Executive Director of CASA Essex County, Tom Conklin, one of the advocate volunteers, and we're going to learn a lot about CASA, which is an incredibly important and incredibly impressive organization. Karen, Tom, welcome.
Thank you so much, Hank.
Thanks for being here. Karen, tell us, what's CASA? What's CASA?
Well, what CASA is we're an independent, court-authorized nonprofit that works through very specially trained citizen volunteers, and they're supervised to make sure they work. They're court-appointed by family court judges to work on behalf of a child who has been removed from their birth home due to abuse, neglect, or abandonment. And while the child is in foster care, the CASA advocate's job is to ensure that needed services and assistance are made available while they're helping to move the child towards a safe and permanent home as soon as possible.
How many foster children are there in Essex County?
Well, last year, ending June 30th, 2011, there were 2,339 children in foster care in Essex County.
So more than there are actually children here at Columbia High School. And I think the statistic is 20% of all foster children in New Jersey are in Essex County, correct?
Yeah, that's an extraordinarily high proportion of the children in the state who are in out-of-home placement, as they call it, are right here in Essex County. 900
chapters of CASA across the country. Where does Essex County rank in that?
Okay, so yes, there actually are a little bit more. There might be about 950 CASA organizations across the United States. It was a very rapidly growing organization, started in 1978. CASA, because our particular CASA is 26 years old, we are, and because we have so many children in foster care and so many children that we're serving, we're definitely within the largest 30 programs in the U.S., which is definitely a dubious distinction because there's so much pain behind that statistic.
It's an astounding number when you think about it. Tell me, how does CASA work? How are you different from other social services? How are you different from, say, DIFAS?
Okay, well, we're a nonprofit. We're an independent nonprofit. We work very closely with DIFAS. We are actually the assets of the judiciary. We work for the family court judges. So when a child comes into foster care, there's two branches of society that are tasked with making sure that they have a safe passage. Both the judiciary, who looks out to make sure that due process is followed for both the family and for the child, and DIFAS, which is tasked with their care and custody. What CASA does is, if a case, among all cases that are before the judges, and there's 5 family court judges in Essex that hear this case type, if they think that the case is particularly challenging, there's multiple children in the family, the child has had multiple placements, there's educational deficits, there could be any number of situations, the court will say, I'd like to have a CASA advocate on this case. So then we partner, we report, we do an independent investigation, third party, unbiased by the volunteers, who then report back to the family court judges the results of what they think is in the child's best interest, both what they need right now while they're in care, and they do a lot of interviewing, a lot of work to form an informed recommendation on what should be what's in the child's best interest in the future. The way we work differently is that we work for the judge. We work very collaboratively with DIFAS, but we have the advantage, the real difference is one advocate, one child, or one sibling group. So it's that individual one-to-one focus on that child or family sibling set's needs, and that's what's different, because a caseworker, as much as they've reduced case sizes to be like maybe 15 children and maybe 10 families, that's still more, CASA is able to provide that one-to-one focus.
This isn't just incredibly time-consuming, each case, but it's obviously very emotion-consuming as well, isn't it? I just can't imagine. But maybe, Tom Conklin, you are one of the advocate volunteers. You can maybe shed some light on.
Yes, I'm a mentor.
A mentor as well.
Volunteer, which means that I've been working with an adolescent. I've had one case I began as a CASA volunteer in the spring of 2009. So this has been 3 years I've been working with this young man. He was 16 years old when we first started working, and now he's 19 years old. He'll be able to continue to get services through DIFUS until he reaches his 21st birthday. So as a mentor, the role is to help him make his transition to independence. That's the way. So in addition to being the CASA advocate, which is, as Karen was saying, being like the eyes and ears for the court and the voice for the child to advocate for him in court, you also then have to help him move outside of the court, outside of the DIFUS system, and into the real world.
It's a remarkable responsibility because you've got basically 2 more years before he reaches that magic number of 21 of independence, but you're still catching him up, in this case, with probably so much development that just wasn't there because of his situation, correct? How are you trained? How are you trained to handle these
there's a
cases?
very good training. It takes what? It's like 3 weekends?
There's a 33, all CASA advocates, whether they are assigned to teenagers or whether they are assigned to little ones, they have a basic training that's 33 hours, and we do it 5 times a year, and it's usually a combination of Saturdays and evenings, but 3 times it's a dominant pattern of 3 Saturdays and a few evenings, and then twice we do it where it's really evenings throughout the week. But then in mentors, there's an additional
additional training up front before you get your case, and then after you are assigned your case, there's a couple of other sessions you come in for where the person who ran the original training, then you talk about the case itself and how things are going. And in addition to that, we did a special curriculum, Fostering Futures.
Right, and Fostering Futures, Essex was one of 8 programs in the country that piloted. We were really lucky because we already had a mentoring program, but we were interested in this because it had great tools that gave very practical tools for the advocates to work with the teens. And so Fostering Futures combines looking at what the child's, it's called Older Youth Needs and Resource Assessments, because all children have natural strengths and they have resources to draw upon. And then this other wonderful tool that's called Possible Selves, which is a self-discovery tool, which our mentors take their youth through so that they can really envision themselves in a positive future.
Right. Because so many of these kids, they can't see past the day after tomorrow. Teenagers like that are like that naturally, but these kids, in the environments in which they've been raised, they haven't been raised to think that there's a bright future.
There's just
for
an
them.
immediacy to it's a survival instinct, even for many of them, correct? And,
and what this curriculum does is it gets them to start thinking about what they have succeeded at in the past, what they like to do, what they're good at, and then you begin to plan with them how that will look when they're 30 years old. And
what are the steps that they need to take to get there? Because if you don't have a parent that's really helping you the natural way that children in families who have experienced this before, to take them through the planning steps for how do you get that kind of a career and break it down, and what kind of courses do you need to take, and what kinds of jobs would be helpful, what are the steps that lead to a self-sufficient, positive adulthood.
The stuff that a lot of people take for granted.
Yes,
that they just assume it's there. It's there in the family. It's in the household. It's even in school. But even school becomes an issue, and we'll talk about that more later. Correct.
And you really need modeling. And so, what a mentor advocate does is they're like what all advocates are, but in this particular role, what a mentor advocate does is model really positive. The positive fruition of having applied yourself, but they do it with kindness and they do it with love in their heart, and so it's pretty special.
It's the way I put it with my young man is I'm like Jiminy Cricket, and he says that. He says, "I'll be with him." He says, "I hear your voice in my head sometimes."
That's remarkable. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of angst that goes on in the lives of these children. Tell me something positive. Tell me a happy story, a breakthrough that you've had with.
Well, I thought we were having a hard time because he's now he's in college, but he wasn't doing so well in college, and he about a month ago said, "I'm quitting. I just can't do it anymore." He had failed 2 courses in the fall, in English and a math course, and he looked like he was failing them again. And everyone that knew him and cared about him was telling him he should stick it out, but he was still says, no, I can't do this. And then he told me he did it. And then I saw him this weekend, and he said, well, no, what I meant was he stopped going to the English course because he just doesn't like English. So then I said, well, let's look at your transcripts. So I got out my phone, and he called up his transcripts, and he actually got a C+ in his math class, which was pretty good, I thought. And then he had been taking an elective in music. That's one of his ambitions. That's what we discovered in the Fostering Futures. He wants to be a musician or work as a sound engineer. And he got an A in that class.
Wow.
So we went from, I thought, oh, this is it. He's got, who knows what's going to happen to him, where now he's got something he can build on.
So there's a breakthrough, and that's something to build on and try to get some momentum. I guess you're really trying to get momentum with a lot of these kids when you're mentoring them. And you also said that there's
do well in English.
Right. I think I do too. You also, though, mentioned as we were talking before we started taping, there's even some breakthrough with him on a job front, perhaps too.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So it's nice to see the pieces start to fall in place. That's got to be incredibly rewarding.
And that's what really,
because some days aren't rewarding, are they?
When I first was working with him, I asked the CASA supervisor who I was working with at the time, so why does he need a mentor? He says, well, he doesn't want to come out of his room. He'd been in foster care since he was 2 years old. Well, when he was going to and from school, he would pass a gas station every day. And one of his member of his foster family said, the guy in that gas station has got a nice car I'm interested in. Could you go in and talk to him? He went in there, struck up a conversation with the guy, and long story short, the guy's offered him a job at the gas station. So that's what, I really feel good about that, because like I said, when he was 16 years old, he was so introverted, he didn't want to come out of his room.
Right. So
Tom got him out.
And it's, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is a lot, and especially where he was coming from. That's fantastic. The training really is critical, isn't it?
The training is critical, and it's a program that it starts at National CASA, which is a wonderful organization, and then we've customized it to Essex. We have some really special programs in Essex that are different, or you know that we believe in continuous improvement, so we work really hard on it. So we have some really special educational advocacy programs. We've got the mentoring, we've got healthcare advocacy, but the training. Just
this Saturday, they offered a healthcare training. That I've been at it for 3 years, and it looked interesting. I went in, and it was very, very helpful.
So you know, this is the kind of thing that a citizen can make time if they can just do the training, and their heart feels a tug because they'd like to help a child have a future and help them believe in themselves. Then this is a wonderful way to be very concrete in giving a child a gateway to adulthood. And for the little ones, it's like it helps set them up for success, and there's a lot of advocacy that you can do to help them get what they need.
That's what drew me into it, is I wanted to do volunteer work. I wanted to help people. And I heard about CASA, and I have a relative who's a family attorney, and I mentioned it, and she says, yes, you should do this, because there's really no better way to help an individual who needs the help more than anyone else. It's the most vulnerable people in our society.
Right.
And you have an immediate and direct impact on their welfare.
That's fantastic. Thank you for the work that you put in. We'll be back after this public service announcement to talk a little bit more about CASA and meet another one of the volunteers.
Television is a powerful and influential medium that allows different groups the opportunity to produce programming that directly affects their own communities. Public, educational, and government access channels ensure that all people, regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religion, or economic status, have access to local government information and the use of a public communication forum. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Hi, welcome back. Karen, what does CASA mean?
Actually, CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And that is really what that means, is the CASA empowers everyday citizens, and they become officers of the court. And their work and what they investigate and what they say to the family court judge has immense value and immense weight because they're volunteers and they're only interested in what's in the best interest of the child. So they're officers of the court.
How many advocates are there in CASA, Essex County?
It's unbelievable. We have 256 fantastic people who do this work.
And that sounds like an awful lot of help, but it really isn't.
It's the largest group of advocates in New Jersey in all the programs, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's only 26%. We only can serve 26% of the children, and
Wow.
we really need more advocates. And
Wow.
we really need, in addition to advocates who will work with young children, we need advocates who will work with teenagers.
How does somebody become an advocate? We'll ask that right now.
Okay, the process is simple. You go to our website, www.casaessex.org, and you can learn a lot about us, and then you would fill in an application that's right on the website. You would send it in, we'd have an in-person interview. We would need references. You'd have to agree to do a background check, which is very thorough, and it's very important, as you'd
Especially
imagine.
these days.
And then we give you a 33-hour training, and you're assigned to a
Only
case.
33.
You're assigned to a case supervisor, and there will be a case waiting for you because there is a backlog of cases waiting for advocates.
And as we learned in the first segment with Tom, you get 33 hours up front, but the training really never stops,
It
does
continues.
it?
It's
Yeah,
10 hours.
continues.
We ask you to have a continuous education 10 hours a year, and
Wow.
that's very reasonable. And we have very, very exciting programs.
Tell me some of the range of things that a CASA volunteer advocate does.
Okay, well, there is a big range. I mean, there's a 20-point protocol that advocates do. They cover on an initial basis and then throughout the life of the case on a repetitive basis. So basically, they visit the child monthly in their placement to make sure to be the eyes and ears of the court in that placement, make sure that they're safe and that they're thriving. They build a relationship with the child so that the child comes to know them as a caring adult who is a consistent presence, and people who are long-term advocates, and on average people stay with us 2 years, but there are many people who stay with us 3, 4, 5 years, but we ask you for 1 year. But it kind of gets into your heart and people continue on with the work. And so they'll get to know the child, and sometimes they're the most consistent person in the foster child's life because placements change and caseworkers change, but the CASA advocate often doesn't change, and so very often doesn't. And so that's important. Then what they'll do is they'll work with the teacher and they'll do education advocacy. They'll work to make sure that their health care is update, that they have both a baseline diagnosis of what they need when they come into care and that they get it. And it's really important that we stay on top of their mental health needs because that's the crippling part. And then the other thing is that if for children who are older, the advocate can learn how to do internet-enhanced searches for family connections for the child that may have been overlooked if they came into foster care when they were 3 years old, and then we teach them through there's new tools to be able to find people that may not have been appropriate placements or even knew about the child, but then they might become a durable family network for the child when he ages out or she ages out.
So you mentioned educational advocacy, and that's a good time to segue into our next
It's perfect.
volunteer guest, Michelle Bobrow, who is not only a CASA volunteer, but also a resident and very active community member here in Maplewood as well. Michelle, welcome to Community Corner.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here because I've been in Maplewood a very long time and I've been with CASA a very long time.
Probably longer in Maplewood, I think, but still, you've been in CASA how many years? Generally,
I think 22, but I'm not
22.
positive. Yes.
That's amazing. It really is amazing.
I've covered many cases in that time, ranging from a very short stint of maybe 2 or 3 months with a very quickly resolved case with a child going back to family, to one of my earlier cases when we were new that lasted about 10 years because we did not have the recognition with the courts and with DIFAS. The relationships that we have now have developed, so we are able to resolve things. We're much stronger now.
So you've really seen CASA Essex develop remarkably, and probably happy to see that because the need has existed for quite some time, hasn't
And
it?
I have also been with one of the founding organizations of CASA Essex. So I'm proud, I was proud to be there at its birth.
And I think they're proud to have you there now. At 22 years, do you ever get called upon to mentor other advocates?
No.
No, because you're too busy with your caseload.
She has a very, right now she has a hopefully winding down a very large case.
Yes. It started 6 years ago, a family of 5 children. The mother was accused of neglect, and the children were placed in foster care with relatives, but in foster care. And the family grew from 5 children to 7 children to 9 children.
Wow.
The 4 youngest were adopted out of family quite early, and just this past year, the 3 next youngest were adopted again by family. So that was, they're settled. It's not the birth, it's the extended family, but we did good with them. What I did
Good.
with the, speaking of education, the kids had educational needs. Their schooling was not always consistent. They had behavioral problems, and the schools were reluctant to test them to make sure that they were getting the appropriate educational resources. And I was very persistent.
I can imagine you were.
And thank goodness the kids were placed in appropriate educational settings with appropriate plans. So they will be able to proceed educationally in a very positive manner, as good as it can get us, I think.
Right. I mean, keeping up with teens, if it's your own household, is not easy. To be able to do that has to be especially challenging.
Well, the 2 children who are left are older teens. One is 15, one is almost 17. They have multiple problems. They have been in placement for a long time. Even though it's with extended family, nevertheless, it's not mom, and they're not together. And they have a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and as Karen said before, they can't see where they want to be 2 days from today. They only dwell on the past and what happened to them, and they get through today with no idea of tomorrow. And I am the nag, the voice that says you have to do this, that, and the other, as those of us who function well would do with our own families.
True.
So they know I'm there. They know what I'm going to say, whether they abide by it or not. And they also know that I will stick up for them. I always ask them, when we go to court, what do you want me to say? What should I say that you have said? And even though there's a law guardian who speaks up for the children, I will speak to tell the court what they want, but also my opinion as to whether it's appropriate or not.
And that's what's different, because the law guardian will represent what the child says they want, but the court is asking us for our informed recommendation about what is in the child's best interest. So we do that. Related to education, we have a second appointment that Essex County CASA advocates can have, which is called a limited guardian for educational purposes. They're educational surrogates, and with that, they set in motion if they believe if there's no parent who can really look for the evaluation for special education needs, then the CASA advocate can take on that role. And then the law, we have wonderful law and procedural law to have every child who have an education that's appropriate to their needs. And so the CASA advocate can play that role and then really work with the child study team to work with the individual education plan and its updating and whether it's working.
And I've been persistent enough to make sure that I get to all the child study team meetings, all the school adjunct people there, so that I can add my perspective, because I have the longest.
Right.
And I can fill in on history, and I can also make sure that they're doing what I think is appropriate for the child.
Because you have a
regardless of expense.
relationship. You have a relationship
Yes.
with them. And that's what's important here. You're not just a volunteer advocate. You form a relationship. Part of that relationship is knowing when to show some toughness, when to show some tenderness, isn't it?
I think so, you're right.
Yeah.
You nailed
yeah.
it.
And I think you can probably do both really well. That's my guess.
She does it with great love and great aptitude.
And persistence.
Absolutely persistent.
And that's what you have to be, because these are kids who would fall through the cracks otherwise, wouldn't they?
They would, and they do, and it's just, I really wish that there could be a CASA advocate for every child in foster care, just to have that independent asset, that additional help for that child's future.
Tell me a positive story. Tell me something good that's happened. Because again, we hear the statistics. We're hearing some of the stories. We're hearing some of the challenges here. And a lot of times people might get the impression that it's fruitless. But there's not. There's positive things. Share one of your stories.
With the family that I have now, the good thing is that 7 of the 9 have been adopted. I have been very forceful in making sure that the kids had appropriate psychological and psychiatric evaluations to make sure that they were getting the best that they could possibly get. And all of those kids were adopted. One of the kids had very serious acting out problems in school. I've never before heard of a child being expelled from a school bus. However, he was, and finally had him evaluated, and the school district said we can deal with him even though he was expelled from kindergarten as well. We got him through the school district into a very special school, specialized for children with behavioral needs.
Wow, that's great.
And he is a success now.
That's great.
So
That's great.
that makes it worthwhile.
It really does make it worthwhile. Here's the broader challenge. We're coming out of an awful economy, which means 2 things: less funding and greater demand, correct?
The demand is holding steady. There is an effort it's a great effort by the Department of Children and Families to work with families in their home and to provide services so that maybe the family doesn't have to, the children don't have to come in foster care. So the numbers have come down a little bit. But the funding needs, it's a challenge in this economy. We're going to be in the 4th year. Hopefully, we won't be starting a 4th year of the recession, but we've had our challenges. We've maintained. We've gotten some wonderful new funders, but and we do have a balance. We're about $1 million in terms of our size. We have 20 employees, 11 of whom are case supervisors who work directly to supervise and to help the advocates, which is a really important point. If you're an advocate, you're not doing it alone. You do have a case supervisor who really tactically guides you on what's the next step, and you also analyze together what you're observing. But we do have funders. We're a combination of foundations. We have some government grants. We have there's an appropriation by the New Jersey legislature that supports the CASA programs. It gives us, it's not a lot of money, but it helps. It's very helpful to all the programs. And we have, individual donations are very important. The one thing that CASA really needs, in addition to donations, is advocates. It's volunteers.
Okay.
And so that's the most valuable thing most valuable message that we'd like to get out is that we really can use additional volunteers.
Great. We could talk forever about this. I would love to talk more about this. I do appreciate not just your important and your good words here today, but your important and good works that you keep doing. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope people really tune in and pay attention to it. I think it's been a really important and eye-opening community corner. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for watching, folks.
Thank you.